Hey everybody, have you ever wanted to use your flight simulator to simulate real-world time and weather, general aviation flying, and be able to get there in a somewhat realistic-ish way? But when you look at IFR flying and stuff, you get involved with SIDs and stars, controllers, all that. It gets pretty complicated pretty quick. Anyway, this is intended to try and make that just a little bit easier, just so you can get from A to B and try and enjoy the flight. Now, just to be clear, this is not a real-world IFR tutorial, and it is not a study-level IFR procedure tutorial. It's just for having fun in your simulator. So as long as we're all on the same page with that, let's get at it. Today we're going to fly from Astoria to Portland, Oregon, and we're going to do it in X-Plane12. We're going to take the Beechcraft Baron 58, and it should be about a half-hour flight. When we switch over to the IFR chart for this route, we can see that minimum altitudes are around 5,000 or 5,300 feet. Looking back on the VFR chart, we can see that the high point is Saddle Mountain at about 3,200 feet. Heading east, we want to pick an odd altitude, so 5,000 feet should be adequate for this trip. Using the chart on the SkyVector website, we can hover over the weather station for an airport and get the real-world current weather. In this case, I should have been taking off heading west. The winds are from 260 at 7 knots. But since it's not real, I'm going to take off with a slight tailwind on runway 08. Moving on down to Portland, I can hover over it and get the weather there. In this case, the winds are from 170 at 7 knots. So with the winds from that direction, I'm going to pick runway 10 left. And that has us landing into the wind, but with a right-hand crosswind component. Now this is a chart of Astoria, and since we're not going to worry about SIDs, it's going to be just get on the runway and off we go. We're going to try and have fun with this one. Here's the airport diagram for Portland. First we're going to try rotating it. And runway 10 left is at the top, and that's the runway we're going to target. This is the ILS chart for runway 10 left at Portland. I decided to do an ILS just because I like doing that with the smaller aircraft. This has some important pieces of information for us. Up here on the top left, we can find our localizer channel of 111.3. That's what we'll set our navigation radio, so we'll be able to follow the ILS down. And here at the bottom, we can see that lining us up for the runway are 2 waypoints that we're going to pick, which is Buxom at 3,000 feet and Trail at 2,300 feet. Picking the second waypoint helps us to line up directionally correct to follow the ILS straight down to the runway. Time to file your flight plan, and let's get going. So here we are in the Baron on the ramp at Astoria. I changed the weather from real-world weather to non-precision IFR weather, just to make sure that there's no question we're doing this IFR. So if you click on the 530, you can enlarge it. And now we have to enter our waypoints. Currently the waypoint is showing the airport where we are, Astoria. Push on the cursor button, we highlight that. Now we turn the small knob and start selecting the initials of our first waypoint. Use the large knob to advance to the next initial. and carry on through until we get the entire name of the waypoint entered. Now we hit enter and enter, and there it is. Now we can push the cursor button to highlight where we were, and then hit the clear, and then enter to get rid of that waypoint. Now we can do the same thing and enter our next waypoint. Now we hit enter to accept, and then go up to our first waypoint, hit the direct to button, then we hit the enter button to activate it, then hold the clear button, and we'll go back to our map view. Now I'm going to do the lazy way of setting our nav channel frequencies and just do it off the map. When you're using an IFR map, you can click on the ILS on the map and just click set nav 1, nav 2, all done. Now I'm just going to get rid of the steering column long enough to see the switches. Turn on all our lights. Everything else looks good. We have fuel. Temperatures are good. We don't need anti-ice on at this point. Okay, let's taxi to the runway. Okay, full throttle. Try and stay straight on the runway. Okay, over 500 feet a minute. Vertical up. Raise the gear. Flaps, and we're trying to stay on course, but my priority right now is trying to trim for a nice climb, rate of climb. Once I have that, I'll turn on the autopilot to follow the course and just leave the rate of climb set manually using the trim until we get to our 5,000 foot altitude. Okay, I think we're pretty close to a stable rate of climb there. We'll turn on the autopilot and hit the nav button, and we can confirm that by looking at our annunciator up at the top. Now we just wait until we're on course and we get to our 5,000 foot altitude. We'll know that we're on course, not only because we can see on the Garmin 530 map that we're following that magenta line, but the needle on our HSI will close up to look like a single needle. Okay, it looks like the needle has closed up pretty well, so we're basically holding course now and just waiting to get to altitude. We're now approaching 5,000 feet, so we have to set the altitude on the autopilot. Lock it on now using the altitude button. Now that we're settled into straight and level flight, we can probably pull back on our throttle, bring the manifold pressure down, and we can bring the prop control back to a similar number, maybe one or two more. So we're running, it looks like around 22, 24. And then we can pull our mixture back and watch our exhaust gas temperature. And that will go up. When that starts coming down, we've gone a little too far. So put our mixture, the red handle, forward a little bit to keep that temperature in a good range. So this is a good time to start planning our descent. If we hit the VNAV button on the bottom row over 530, we can get to our vertical navigation page. And you may remember we want to be at 3,000 feet at Buxom. So using the right hand button, we can use the small button to make selections, the large button to move to the next item. And I'm going to choose around 800 feet per minute because I want to have a little bit steeper descent coming down over the mountains. And then we hit clear to get back to our map page. That beeping you're hearing is because on the radio I turned on the ability to hear the ILS. So now that we're hearing that Morse code, that means we're receiving that channel, and we should be good to have an ILS descent. Now, according to the screen, we're going to have to begin descent in a little over 5 minutes. Okay, well that 5 minutes went by quickly. Time to start a descent. So we'll put our props full forward to fine pitch. We'll put our mixture full rich and start throttling back a bit and give a couple presses on the down button on the autopilot. We're trying to achieve the target we're looking for of rate of descent on the Garmin. I did get a little anxious and started the descent about 625 feet per minute indicated rather than 800. So now we'll just continue our descent down toward the 3,000 foot mark. And just as in the climb, once we cross that 3,000 foot point, we hit the altitude button on the autopilot, and that should lock it in. Just a quick explanation of the autopilot. This is the button we turned it on with. This is the nav button that we locked onto our course with. This is the altitude button that we hit when we're passing through the altitude we want to hold. And soon we'll hit this approach button. We're now approaching our 3,000 foot altitude. And we'll hit that altitude button on the autopilot right now. There, we've locked it in 3,000 feet. Now very close to our first waypoint, Buxom, and we know we have a strong ILS signal because we could hear it a while back there. Our needles on the HSI are lined up, so we're pretty well lined up for the ILS anyway. So what we want to do is change our CDI to show V-lock and then hit that approach button on the autopilot. Once we've done that, we are now locked to follow the ILS down to the runway. You may have noticed when we hit V-lock, the HSI needles appeared. They currently are showing we're a little below the glide slope, but since the autopilot's holding altitude until we meet up with the glide slope, we're going to see those needles come down shortly. And now you can see they are coming down nicely. Once they get to the midpoint, our descent will begin. And typical ILS, we should see around 500 feet per minute descent. Okay, the autopilot is beginning our descent. Now we can throttle back and start preparing for approach. Back to speed, gear down, and set the flaps to approach. I'm going to adjust throttle now to hold an approach speed of around 110 knots. One thing to remember is this is not an airliner, so it's not auto throttle. We have to tweak the throttle setting now and then to maintain our airspeed, as it is actually controlling our descent rate following the glide slope. Okay, our descent has us down around 500 feet altitude. Just beginning to see some ground out the window occasionally. Once I decide to take over manual control, I'll simply give a little tweak on the trim button. Adjusting the trim will then release the autopilot, and I'll land it manually. Okay, the runway's in sight. The lights, our glide slope's good. I'm taking this one in on autopilot way down, so it may be a little shaky when I flip to manual. There, manual, and not my smoothest landing, but at least we're down in one piece. Wet runway like this, it would be nice to have reverse thrust and probably anti-lock brakes. Oh well. At least it's not real. See you again next time.